everybody. I'm Evie Roberts, and this is my podcast, Talking in the Dark. Welcome. The aim of this podcast is to raise awareness about blindness, visual impairment, and disability in general, in a happy and light-hearted way. For those of you that don't know, I am blind. I was born with a condition called bilateral anophthalmia. Try spelling that one. It basically means that when I was born, my eyes didn't develop properly, so I wear prosthetics instead. The goal of this podcast is to remove some of the stigma and stereotypes around disabilities, whilst also having fun at the same time. Each week, I will be interviewing people from all walks of life, including some with hidden or physical disabilities like mine, and getting to know a little bit more about them and the lives they lead. In this episode, I am very excited to tell you that I will be talking to multidisciplinary creative practitioner and founder of CRIPtic Arts, JAIMIE Hale. My name is Evie Roberts, and this is my podcast, Talking in the Dark. Welcome. Hey JAIMIE, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I'm really good, thank you. How's your day going so far? Have you been up to anything today?
It's been a bit of a busy day, but this is certainly going to be the highlight. So thank you so much for having me.
Oh, thank you. That's well, yeah, I mean, it's such an honor to meet you and so lovely to have you on the podcast. So it's been a bit of a busy day, has it? I mean, what have you been up to? Is there anything that you can tell us about what you've been doing?
Um, I've had a preparation for a couple of events and some script writing for a show I'm doing, and then I've also been handling some media that came out of my university graduation stage, not having wheelchair access arranged, and I suppose the issues that highlights that wheelchair users face in society more broadly.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, it does. It really does highlight that, and that definitely shouldn't have happened. And I mean, that must have been quite hard hitting for you as well, especially, it's your graduation day. You want to be able to get up on that stage, but just because that's not accessible, you're not able to do that. I mean, I can imagine I mean, I'm guessing that must have hurt quite a lot.
It was it was a shock. It was upsetting. It was it very much also felt like my day job was impeding on my life, and on a day that I just wanted to be able to just be a student and celebrate my graduation. Instead, I was dealing with access breakdowns, and given that it was held at an institution that is so nationally known, the South Bank Centre, one would have thought that access would be easy and well set up, and it was a real disappointment for me that it wasn't. But I'm also optimistic that UCL has really understood how bad that was and will actually make change, which is something.
Yeah, I mean, that's good that they've understood that, and I think it'll be a real learning curve for a lot of people that, but yeah, it shouldn't have happened. And yeah, especially at a place like that, you'd really think that they'd have implemented those accessibility features a long time ago. But I think that would be a real lesson for a lot of people there. So to begin with, I know that, like me, you have a disability. So could you tell me a little bit about your disability?
I always find that a really interesting question because I think often we think about disability from quite a medicalized perspective. And so, because of that, I tend not to talk about my condition or my diagnosis because I think for me, what's more relevant is the ways in which disabled people who face lots of different access barriers for lots of different reasons have so much in common. So I'm an electric wheelchair user. I have 24-hour round the clock care. Um, I am, I suppose, what people describe as profoundly disabled. But I think so much of that actually comes from the ways in which society isn't adapted to meet my needs rather than anything inherent to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good take to have on that because, yeah, I mean, the thing that immediately flashes into my head there, and I completely agree with what you said about how, it's society that sort of makes you disabled, not your actual disability. And I was taught ages ago, about a year ago, on a podcast I did with Annalisa Danella, who's a very talented radio and screenwriter, and she taught me about the social model of disability and how that kind of states that it's more society that makes a person, it makes a person's disability a big deal rather than the actual disability itself. If society were to have all the access needs, and requirements that it should have, disability wouldn't actually be as big of a deal as it's sometimes portrayed. And so yeah, I think that's a really nice take to have on that. Um, so obviously, like you mentioned, you have sort of 24-hour round the clock care. So I'm guessing that, your carers must be a really big help to you. And I mean, I would imagine, do you kind of get to know them quite well?
I do, yeah. The way that my care package works is called a personal health budget and direct payments. So what that means essentially is that I'm responsible for recruiting them, training them, managing them, all of those elements, which means that I can really recruit people I'll work well with and train them to meet my needs. I think without that, it would be a lot harder. And it does mean I get to know people really well. I'll work with people over a period of years. We'll see each other through various life milestones. And I'm I'm very aware both that it took me almost dying for me to get this care package, but also how lucky I am to have it because it lets me live, work, travel, be married, have my dog, have my career, and broadly just have a really good life. And I know that a lot of people don't have an amount of care that can give them that.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, yes, it probably shouldn't have took a sort of near-death experience for you to get that care, but, like you say, it has enabled you to do so much. And yeah, I think it's great that you sort of the fact that you're responsible for recruiting them and training them, I think it gives you the ability you can choose sort of the best fit for your needs and choose someone who you think will do really well, and you have that control so you can train them depending on what you need. And I think that's really brilliant that you sort of have total control over that kind of thing.
Yeah, it really is. It is fantastic. I think without this care package, I don't really I cannot imagine what my life would be like. And I feel very, very lucky that I don't have to anymore.
Yeah, 100%. So like you say, you're kind of what people may describe as profoundly disabled, and you use an electric wheelchair. Have you come across any sort of common misconceptions or stereotypes surrounding your disability?
I think there's just people are so often surprised by the things I'm doing with my life. They're surprised that I work, they're surprised that I'm married. When I was picking up my graduation gown, I very much got the sense that they were all expecting it to be my wife that was graduating and me that was the guest, rather than the other way round. There's an assumption that as disabled people, we can't or don't achieve the same things as everyone else. And I think those assumptions make it so hard to achieve things because if everyone around you is telling you that you're not going to be able to, how do you come to believe that you will?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more, honestly. Yeah, and I think been an assumption that's surrounded disability for a number of years. And although I think there's more awareness about disability now than there was a while ago, and that's something I've learned from my guests as well, but I think there's more awareness about it now. There's still a long way to go before we have a totally equal sort of society. But I mean, there is obviously, yes, that assumption that because a person is disabled, they can't do the things that everyone else would be able to do. Do you think that we will eventually be able to get rid of that stereotype, and what steps do you think can be taken to sort of get rid of it?
I don't think we're going to be able to get rid of it until we get rid of all of the barriers that disabled people face. And I think that that would be incredibly challenging and fundamentally would require us to completely reorganize society, because so much of society is built around these ideas of productivity and non-disabledness that it would require a complete reorganization of all of that for us to really get rid of these sets of problematic assumptions. But I certainly think that there has been a lot of change. And I think one of the key things behind that has been more and more disabled people being visible in the public eye, more and more things like situations of discrimination being taken seriously by the media, and more people see and learn about the lives of disabled people, which for non-disabled people, I suppose, shows them what we're out there doing. And for other disabled people, it shows us what we could be doing.
Yeah, I think they're two very good points there, because I think it shouldn't be the case, but it is. For some non-disabled people, they have sort of a out of sight, out of mind perspective on things. So if people if able, non-disabled people don't have someone they know who has a disability, or don't have, or aren't seeing people in the public eye who have disabilities, then they kind of have this sort of thing of, well, it doesn't affect me. But the chances are that at some point in your life, it will disability will affect everyone, even if it's not them personally. We all know people. So the chances are that someone close to you may develop a disability, and it probably will affect you at some point. But I also think, yeah, it gives disabled people a role model. I think if people with disabilities are seeing people like them, even if they don't have the same disability as them in the public eye, it gives them the opportunity to go, well, if they can do that, then why can't I? It might make them think about new things that they could try, or if they have been wanting to try something for ages and see someone else do it with a disability, it might enable them to sort of take that leap of faith and try it for themselves. So yeah, I think I think that's a really sort of positive thing, and it's brilliant that people with disabilities are starting to have more role models that are also disabled.
I think if you can't encounter adult versions of yourself in society, you don't know what you can be. And it's only when you encounter other people who you perceive as like you doing things that you realize you can. And it's one of the reasons I was really keen to come on this podcast, because I think what you're doing is showing so many other disabled people, and especially disabled young people, that they can put themselves out there and get involved and make a difference in a really tangible way. And they know that it's possible because you're doing it. And if you're doing it, why can't they?
Oh, thank you. That's really kind of you. I mean, yeah, that's definitely one of the things that I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make a difference, and I've always said as well, I've always said a couple things. It's the reason the podcast is so brilliant, or one of the big reasons, is down to the guests that I interview as well. And I think it's a real team effort. You are so incredible, and we're going to get to your career, your incredible career, in a minute. But all the things you've accomplished are so amazing, and I'm sure that you are sort of a real role model to many people as well. But like I was saying, a big part of why the podcast is what it is the guest. I think it's a real team effort to show people that they can put themselves out there or they can try certain careers. But I also have always said, if I can teach one person something with this podcast, then I am happy with that. And if I could maybe inspire someone to try podcasting or try presenting or try interviewing or try something like what I'm doing, I would be elated with that. I would be so ecstatic to learn that I've been able to do that.
And I think often one of the things that is both beautiful and difficult is that we will never know the people whose lives we've impacted often, that the impact will just happen and somebody's life will have been transformed, and we'll never know that it was us that had that influence. And I think one of the things I often try and do is really think about the people who have given me the opportunities that have really transformed my life, and try to really recognize that, because I wouldn't be where I am now if not for an awful lot of people, some of whom will very much know about their influence and others will have no idea. And I guess I think it's so valuable to be able to recognize that, but also so beautiful that in some ways we will never know all the people whose lives we've changed.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there is something really beautiful about that concept. So let's sort of move on and talk a little bit about you and your career. Now, on your website, you describe yourself as a crip artist, curator, poet, writer, screenwriter, playwright, actor, facilitator, trainer, director, and CEO. So, can you explain the reason behind all the different roles?
I think I also describe myself as a multidisciplinary creative, otherwise known as indecisive. Um, and that's definitely part of it. Another part of it is that I haven't had, I suppose, a normal career path. So I've taken the opportunities that have come my way, and that's ended up with me doing some really exciting things, but in a really wide range of fields. So maybe not, rather than committing and training in one very specific area of focus, I've ended up doing lots of different things, and that's been absolutely fantastic. And I feel very lucky to have done it.
Yeah, I mean you've accomplished some incredible things, but yes, I agree with you about taking opportunities, and it's a thing I've talked about with a couple of guests before in the past. But I think there's something so crucial about when an opportunity comes your way, I would say try your best to say yes. I do think that there's this sort of human instinct to, and I definitely get it, of like we don't like change. Humans just don't like change. We like our routine. So when a new opportunity comes along, it will probably require change. It will also require stepping into the unknown, which we also don't like. So I think some people, when they have a new opportunity, they can sort of close up and not want to take it. I get that's definitely something I've done in the past, but I think there's something so vital and crucial saying yes, taking that leap of faith, because you never know what can come out of it. And like you said, there are so many that you can really accomplish some fantastic things by just saying yes to those opportunities that come your way.
And I think also by knowing that when an opportunity comes your way, it's often because somebody believes in you, even if you don't believe in yourself. And so I've had to learn to trust that maybe those people know what they're doing. And if they've offered me this opportunity, maybe they actually know better than I do that I'm capable of doing it.
Yes, yeah, 100%. I mean, yeah, self-belief. It's one of those things that I think a lot of people struggle with. And like you say, I often find that people believe in you more than you believe in yourself. So yeah, it's about thinking, well, maybe if they think I can do it, maybe I can. But yeah, I think self-belief is one of those very human struggles that, you know, I think most of us go through.
And I think also one of the points my wife once made that really stuck with me about when things go wrong was, is anyone actually going to thank you for doing this thing properly? Is anyone going to be badly hurt or killed if you make a mistake? And is anyone going to remember it in a year's time if you make a mistake, if this goes wrong, etc.? And that reminded me that actually, even when things feel very high stakes, taking an opportunity doesn't have to be. It's unlikely to result in any massive harm, and it's unlikely to result in any massive impact to me. So if it doesn't work out, maybe I'm a bit embarrassed, but that's the worst it is.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah. I mean, my mom always says to me, because like I feel like a lot of us don't like making mistakes as well. We want to be perfect at things first time, or we want to just be perfect full stop. But that is impossible. Nobody's perfect. And very few people can be good at something first time. And my mom always says to me, like, when things go wrong, she's like, well, it's not the end of the world, is it? You know, the world's not going to end just because you did something wrong. And it's like, okay, you made a mistake. That's how you learn. You wouldn't learn if you were perfect at everything first time. And so, yeah, it's not the end of the world if something goes wrong or something doesn't work out. And at the end of the day, you've learned a lesson from it.
Indeed. And I think also disabled people are placed under so much pressure, because I often feel like if I mess up an opportunity, then that's going to reflect on maybe the next time they think about having a disabled person, they're going to think, well, it went wrong last time or whatever. And I find that pressure really difficult, that I feel like anything I'm doing needs to be done perfectly, because I'm not just representing myself, I'm representing disabled people as a whole. But one of the things I've really had to come to learn is that actually that's not on me. If people are going to treat me like a representative of disabled people, then that's actually their problem, not mine. And all I have to do is succeed as much as I can for myself, rather than taking on the weight of that pressure, which just isn't being given to non-disabled people in the same way.
Yeah, I genuinely couldn't agree with that. I couldn't agree with that more. And yeah, you're totally right. You know, not one person can represent an entire community, because we're all human and we all sort of do things differently. So leading on then, how did your career in the creative industry begin?
I'd always, I think, written, and I'd done some writing workshops and things like that. And I was lucky enough, through kind of a series of connections, to read some work at a showcase at the Barbican Centre a number of years ago. And from there, I got encouragement from the Barbican to start developing a solo show. And later, I asked, can I host a showcase of work by deaf and disabled artists? And they said, well, yeah, but make your solo show part of it. So I did. And in many ways, that's how it got started. But the reason I did it, I think, was because I just found that no one else was making opportunities that were accessible to me. And the only way of having those opportunities was to make them for myself. And I kind of went from that to realizing that if I was making these experiences for myself, then I owed it to other people to make experiences for them as well. And that it wasn't just about me, because actually everyone was facing, or loads of disabled people were facing these barriers. And I was in a position where I could do something about it. So that's really where things like CRIPtic came from. And then other bits of my work emerged from lots of different angles, I suppose. It kind of came out of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you there. It's kind of that thing of sometimes you've got to be the trailblazer. If no one has paved the path already, no one's set the way for you. Sometimes you've got to be the trailblazer. Sometimes you've got to set the way for yourself, and also you can really help out other people in the process.
And I think for me, it's always been about doing that while also knowing that the only reason that I'm in a place where I can do this work and blaze these trails is the trailblazers that have come before me, and how
Yeah.
lucky I am, I guess, that they did the work that has made it possible for me to do the work I do.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess it's like the way I kind of picture it is almost like building a tower, you know. Each sort of trailblazer that comes along adds a new block or multiple blocks to this tower. So in the end, you know, you've got this sort of massive tower that means that anyone's possible, but it's like a relay race, you know. And you know, I think people, you know, these trailblazers work together as a team, one after the other, to sort of try and create a sort of society where, you know, in our case, people with disabilities have the exact same opportunities as people who don't have disabilities.
Yeah, and hmm, I think also for me, it's about thinking both about those trailblazers in the disabled community, but also about the people that take a chance on us and that give us those opportunities, and the impact of that on disabled people.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you there. So you founded Cryptic Arts. So can you tell me a little bit about that organization?
Of course. So originally, I when I first developed my solo show, it was just a set of poems, and then I mentioned the experience at the Barbican. So I did a residency there to develop my show, and I went on from that to doing the showcase at the Barbican Centre with work by disabled artists. And that showcase was cryptic at the beginning, and it was a one-off event. But more and more, I realised that I owed it to other disabled people to build something bigger and longer lasting that wasn't just this one-off, this flash in the pan. So in 2021, I set Cryptic up as an organization. And since then, we now employ 6 people, though obviously not all full time. Um, and we run all sorts of development programs and opportunities for disabled people in in the arts, and particularly in theatre, opportunities to stage work, commissions, and really trying to, what I want to be doing is serving as a launch pad, and people that the industry wouldn't take a chance on, doing that work and taking that chance and putting them in a position where they've got the kind of track record that means then that they can go on and do other work with other organizations because they've done this work. So I think it's always been about, how do I give people the opportunity they need at the moment they need it to change their life? Because actually, so many people have done that for me. And the only thing I can do now is pay that forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's such a brilliant organization, and yeah, the work that you're doing is absolutely incredible, and like you say, is will hopefully give sort of disabled people the chance to, and it'll be like a sort of stepping stone and give disabled people the chance to maybe, you know, do other work as well, and become sort of more well known in the industry. So I believe you worked on the Netflix series Chaos, which came onto Netflix very recently. Now it stars Jeff Goldblum as Zeus. And can you tell me how that opportunity came about and what the experience was like for you?
Opportunities so often come our way in ways we weren't expecting. And I think it was 2017 that I was going to be reading some poems at an event at the Barbican. And I was being a bit last minute. And as late as the performance week, I was still frantically writing. And one of them mentioned a relatively obscure character from Greek mythology. And it just so happened that in the audience was Charlie Cavell, who had written The End of the Fucking World and was developing Chaos, in which that character Thenius or Caneus, depending on which pronunciation you take, was very significant. And so Charlie got in touch with me and we met up and we talked about it. And they asked, would I do some consulting on the series? And then a bit later on, they asked me to send them some writing. So I just sent some writing through. And they asked if I'd be willing to join the writer's room. And I'd never worked in television at all. I grew up without a TV, so I've not watched that much TV either. And I was super excited. This was incredible. It was 2019. It was an amazing opportunity. And there was a huge problem. I was in hospital and I was very unwell and I was going to be in hospital for the foreseeable future. And that ended up being a 6-month hospitalization. And I still can't believe that they did this, but Charlie was just like, well, that's not a problem. Work for the hospital if you can't come in. And so I spent 6 months in hospital working for Netflix. And what a vote of trust and confidence from Charlie. They went to a huge amount of effort to do things like make sure that the writer's room had all of the access facilities I needed in case I could get in for the odd day. But otherwise, I just worked remotely. And the fact that they were just willing to adapt everything about the way they worked to meet my needs was one of those things. I mentioned the things that change your life, and this was one of them, because that showed me that I could work. And because I realized I could work, I came off benefits, and my wife and we got together, I think in around that time, and got married not that much later. And now I'm in employment, I'm working, I feel very happy with what I'm achieving in my career and in my field. And I'm also very conscious that I'm so sorry, I think there's a helicopter landing outside, hence the background noise. That the amount I've achieved now, so much of it actually goes back to Charlie saying, well, it doesn't matter that you're in hospital, be a researcher anyway. And seeing my name on the credits for a Netflix show was unimaginably good.
Wow, I mean, I'm almost speechless, and that definitely doesn't happen often. But yeah, I mean, that's such a life-changing experience, and so kind of them that they were so willing to adapt things for you and sort of put that trust in you. And obviously that trust really paid off. But I mean, and there were so many things for you that have come out of that. I mean, that must have been, yeah, that must have been really, really life-changing for you.
It was, and it gave me a huge confidence boost. And I think it also taught me that I could and should ask for what I needed. And so while I was doing that and in hospital, I was also developing my show for the Barbican, which was about, it's a complicated show. It was very much about what it means to start coming to terms with your impending death, and then for things to change, and what it suddenly means to actually not have a particularly impending death. But by the time I put it on at the Barbican, I was very seriously ill again. I think a week before the show opened, I had about a 60% chance of surviving the next 48 hours. And the hospital were like, you can forget about the show. And I was just like, no, if I'm alive, I'm doing the show, and that's that. So there was me 4 days later on stage at the Barbican, still hooked up to all of my drips and IVs and just everything, because I wasn't going to let the opportunity slip away. And I think one of the things that having dealt with very serious illness has really taught me, which goes back to our earlier conversation, is just don't let opportunity slip away.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if anything, you're very committed, but yeah, I mean, I'm the thing I really get from that is, yeah, don't let opportunities slip away, but also just how resilient you are. Like, you were very, very seriously ill, but you still wanted to put on that show that you'd worked so hard on, and it makes total sense. But I'm getting from that that you're quite a resilient person.
I'm very lucky, I think, to have been very well supported. And I'm also, I I suppose I've had to build a degree of resilience because, as I'm sure you will also know, it is not easy to be a disabled person in the world. And if you want to do things and achieve things and be things, the only way that's going to happen is if you are resilient. And I know also that resilience almost gets kind of thrown at disabled people as a weapon, as if to say that if we're not resilient enough, then that's our fault. And it's not. And we shouldn't have to be constantly resilient campaigners in order to lead the lives that we want to lead and do the things we want to do. But I'm also very, very glad that I am one.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I really agree with you. I really agree with you on that point. And yeah, I think it's a very good point to make. So what would you say are some of the challenges that you often face as a disabled artist?
I mean, I think often one of the big challenges is just wheelchair access. I feel like I often find it quite upsetting. I feel like people often, in an effort to say that, oh, disability isn't just about wheelchair users. I think people who aren't themselves wheelchair users don't realize how bad access actually often is. And experiences like mine of having to graduate from the floor in front of the stage rather than on the stage, having to compete in a competition that was about getting your solo show to Edinburgh Festival, where everyone else performed on the main stage of a 400-seater theatre, and I performed in a tiny studio space because they didn't have stage access. That I feel like people often speak about wheelchair access as if because we know what we need to do, that means the problem's solved. When actually, I think what often happens is we know what we need to do as a society and we just don't do it. Um, I I mean, wheelchair access isn't the only need I have, but without wheelchair access, I won't be in the room in the first place. And I'd frankly rather be discriminated against in the room than not be allowed into the room to start with.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think that's a really good point you make there about people know what they need to do to make things accessible, but just because people know doesn't mean they're going to do it. Just because people are aware of it doesn't mean they're going to go, well, we should probably do this. It should be the case that they should go, right, we know what we need to do. Let's put it in place before something happens. Let's put it in place so that everyone's welcome. Let's put it in place so that it's accessible. But just because people know that that's what they need to do does not mean that they will actually take the initiative and do it. So yeah, I think that's a very good point you make there.
And I think it's always easy to look at another group and have a kind of the grass is greener on the other side perspective, and to feel like whatever group that is, it's very easy to think, oh, people take that form of discrimination seriously, and yet they don't take the form of discrimination I face seriously. But I think actually it's just impossible to know what it's like for another group unless it's you in that group experiencing it. And at the minute we start trying to say, oh, it's easier for these people for this reason, we're on dangerous territory because we don't actually know.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, yeah, it's like you won't ever really fully understand the struggles of another community unless you are a part of that community. Even if you know someone and you're close to someone who is in that community, you will still never really fully understand. You can empathize with them, you can have a very good idea of what they go through, but you will never completely and utterly understand unless you are a person in that community. And I think as well, that sort of grass is greener on the other side approach, when honestly, we all want accessibility. We all want every place we go to be accessible if possible. Yes, different groups may require slightly different access needs, but we all want things to be accessible.
Indeed. And nobody wants to be shutting people out. But I think it's also the fact that we all actually end up in various ways benefiting from disableism. And when I say we, I very much include disabled people in that. In that, for example, I suspect that if I was let's say I had profound and multiple learning disabilities, I don't think I would have been given many of the opportunities that I have been given. And I don't think I would have received the support and the investment and the trust and the chance and all of that. And so, in many ways, I have structurally benefited from the fact that I'm not in a community that faces that set of discrimination. And I think it's also really vital for those of us that, well, I guess there are types of barrier that we all don't face. And I think it's really important to acknowledge sometimes that some of the opportunities we've had and the possibilities and things will have come to us because we're not in a particular group of people that are discriminated against, and that I benefit from structural disableism in that sense, just as many other people do.
Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, I think that's, yeah, I completely understand that. And I think, yeah, each sort of community has its own barriers that they face and their own discriminations that they face. And some barriers, some discriminations might cross multiple groups. They might interlink. But, you know, no two communities can have the exact same barriers and discriminations and access needs and sort of requirements for accessibility. So do you think these sort of experiences that you've had and these challenges that you've faced often influence your writing?
Yes, I do. I find myself writing a lot about disability, and I often wonder if that's actually what I want to be writing about, or if I just end up writing about it because that's what people want. I sometimes think, when someone wants creative work from me, if I wanted to write a show about football, would people be as interested? Or is it that what they want from me is they want a disabled person to talk about disability? Because if it is, then to some extent that just becomes actually about being a diversity pick. It's not that they're interested in my creative work at all. It's that they want to show that they're working with a disabled person. So I think that's difficult. That's one of the things we've really tried to do with CRIPtic, is be very clear that we want that, when we want work from people, they don't have to be doing work about disability for us to want it. Because actually what we're trying to do is give disabled people opportunities to make the work that they want to be making, and not about saying, well, in order for us to look good, we want to have more work about disability.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, and definitely something that is important to consider. Yeah, I mean, I don't know about you, but I definitely know that I've often found in the past that sometimes people don't see past the disability. They see the disability like you're wearing this big, bright, high-vis jacket, and that's what they see. They see the disability, but they don't necessarily see the person underneath it. They sometimes don't see that just because a person has a disability doesn't mean that they're not human. It doesn't mean that they don't have hobbies and interests and challenges and struggles and things that they love and things that they really, really hate. And it often it can sometimes be the case, and I've definitely found it that they see the disability first, not the person first.
I think that that's a really interesting perspective, because for me, I don't think I can divide the two. And I don't think I would necessarily want someone to see me without also seeing the fact that I'm disabled. But then I think that's because I don't necessarily see being disabled as being something that's inherent to me. It's not that I am inherently disabled, it's that my life and opportunities are fundamentally being defined by the fact that we exist in a society that doesn't give people like me equal opportunities. And I think if someone were to see me and not the disability, then I think they would also be quite fundamentally missing out on the fact that my life is so shaped by this, sorry, they'd be missing out on the fact that my life is so shaped by this, that me and being disabled are completely inextricable, but also that being a disabled person might be absolutely inextricable from everything else I am, but that being a disabled person doesn't mean I'm not also somebody who enjoys, I don't know, travel and cooking and reading and going for long drives and things, but that everything I do is being shaped by the ways in which I'm actively being disabled by society. I don't see it as I don't see disabled as an adjective. I see it as a verb, that I am being disabled, but that experience is so fundamental to me that I cannot be separated from it.
Yeah, I also think that's a really interesting perspective, and one that I definitely agree with. The disability and the person walk hand in hand, and it would be strange for it would be wrong for someone to not see them both, to see the person, but not see the disability. They walk sort of hand in hand, and so, yeah, I think it would be strange for people to see, the person and not acknowledge the disability. Um, I mean, I do think that sometimes people can see it as like the disability and the person are two separate entities, and they look at maybe the disability without looking at the person. But I do think that, yeah, they walk hand in hand. I am someone who's visually impaired, and that's it, in my case, that's part of my identity. So, yeah, I think it's really good for people to see both the person and the disability that goes with it.
And I think it also helps keep that emphasis on the fact that they have to kind of remember, if they do that, then they also have to engage with the fact that they are probably benefiting from a set of opportunities that are closed to me. And I think if people just talk about seeing the person, not the disability, then they can end up in kind of being able to avoid acknowledging the ways in which they as an individual are also benefiting from and complicit in the same situations and the same things that limit the opportunities open to disabled people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's very important that people see both aspects of that, and, yeah, appreciate the benefits that they may have over someone with a particular disability. So, sort of leading on then, what would you say has been your proudest moment so far?
That's a really difficult question, but I think probably actually getting married, because I find it really easy to focus on my career as if that's everything and that's the biggest thing. But actually getting married is, it's a commitment to a future, it's a commitment to being and learning and growing with someone. It's a commitment to being alive and existing in the world. And it's also a real statement of the kinds of lives that disabled people can have. Um, I've got a disabled friend who is a lot younger, I think 11 or 12, and he has a similar condition to me and was absolutely delighted to discover that I have a wife, because actually if I can, then he can as well. And it showed him the things that were possible. And I've always very much defined myself by my career success. I think in the same way as I did by academia, because there are so many things that disabled people aren't allowed and enabled and supported to succeed in. But actually, for me, it's the real joy of the past few years has been finding myself as a person beyond just work. And so I think getting married is probably my proudest moment as a result.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's a really beautiful answer. I really like that answer. And yeah, I can absolutely see why that would be one of your proudest moments. I want to bring up as well, another one of your many achievements. The basically the way that we, the Talking in the Dark team and myself sort of found you was you you attended the Shaw Trust Disability Power 100 Awards last year. And I want to bring that up and basically just say, congratulations. And that is, I mean, such an incredible achievement. And am I right in saying you've been shortlisted again this year?
Yes, I think I think this year is my third time on the list. And I'm actually really proud that CRIPtic has also been shortlisted, because for me that's real evidence of it being something more than just me and about the impact. But I'm also aware that so many of the kind of most influential and successful disabled people aren't on lists like that. So it's always a balance between feeling very proud of it, but also of thinking about the huge achievements of the people that choose not to go for listings like that, and therefore not getting too up myself about it. Because actually, realistically, I'm probably not one of the 100 most influential disabled people in the UK. I'm one of the 100 most influential disabled people that wanted to be on a Shaw Trust list. Um, yeah, the people that come to mind to me immediately that aren't on it are people like Liz Carr. Um, I don't think Jane Campbell is. People like that who've made a huge impact on society and who've chosen not to be involved. So I think I get never want to get too big headed about things like that. But I'm also very proud.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good stance to take, obviously being proud of that incredible achievement, but also recognizing that there are hundreds of really influential disabled people who for some reason may choose that they don't want to be on a list like that. So yeah, I think it's about finding that balance. So looking forward then, do you have any goals or aspirations for the future?
I always find it very difficult to think about that. And I think that's because for a long period, I didn't necessarily know if I would have a future. So, I was planning in kind of weeks and months, and I'm lucky enough that I some of the condition that was contributing most to my risk of having a very shortened lifespan in some ways was something that was actually very treatable and just hadn't been caught. And that since I've been on treatment for that, I've been a lot more able to live my life. And I think in terms of things I want to achieve, I want to build CRIPtic, and I think I'll know I've achieved something with it when I can leave. And that sounds strange, but when I know that it's at a point where I can leave it behind and move on, and it will continue to do the work it's doing and be a great organization, and I won't actually be necessary anymore. So I think for me that's the goal. Um, I've got my own creative work I have been struggling to commit to in some ways. And I'm going to have more time for creative work coming up, which I'm very excited about. I realized that kind of for the sake of my health, I had to move on from one of my jobs, and the result of that will be that bit more time to focus on the creative stuff that I want to focus on. Um, I'm working at the moment on developing a large scale adaptation of Romeo and Juliet, which I'll be doing over the next kind of 4 or 5 years. And I'm really lucky to have that as a funded arts project in the long term, and also to be thinking about whether I want to do that as a PhD, because it would probably be the easiest way of doing a PhD that I can think of. Um, I'm going to admit it, I would love to be well known. I'd love to be a bit of a household name. I That would be fantastic. It always goes to my head when I get recognized in public. But I want to, for me, that's not a goal in and of itself so much as it would be the result of having done something that made that much impact. So I guess that kind of desire is enough to drive me forward and to make me keep trying to do the things that I'm doing well, so that I can end up at a point where I've achieved that. Um, but I'm also aware that the people in that position, it's not easy for. You'd think that it gets sort of, once people are that well known, everything kind of gets handed to them. But actually, they're working and hustling as hard as ever and as hard as I am. And I don't think there are any disabled people really who are so well known that they're no longer facing these barriers. It's just, we're all in similar positions.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a really good point to make there about just because you're well known doesn't mean that you don't have to work just as hard as someone who isn't. But I could absolutely see you being a household name at some point. I would not be shocked at all if you were a very well-known figure at some point. But I wish you the very best of luck with all your aspirations for the future and everything you plan to do. I mean, that large-scale adaptation of Romeo and Juliet, I mean, that sounds very exciting, and I'm sure you've got lots of sort of other exciting things and in the pipeline, and maybe opportunities that you don't even know are going to come along yet. But thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Jaimie. You're such a brilliant person, and I mean, bringing back that conversation we had earlier, you are a trailblazer. You know, you have accomplished some really incredible things and are helping to pave the way for the disabled community. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been a real pleasure to meet you, and it's been a real privilege to get to talk to you.
It's been a privilege to talk to you too. I honestly, I was what, 26, 27 before I reached a point where I was really doing anything or trying to achieve anything at all. And then looking at the amount that you've achieved already, like it's really exciting actually. And I'm really excited to find out what you do next, and to follow what I suspect certainly could be an absolutely sparkling media career, if that's the direction you want to go in. And I think it's a direction you'd be excellent at. But I am sure you have a far wider set of ambitions of your own.
Oh, thank you. That's really kind of you. That's made my day. That's really, really kind of you. Yeah. I would love to go into I would love to have a media career. I guess that's the big dream that I'm kind of pushing towards. And I would really love to have a career in media, but I'd love through that to try and make a difference and try and help the disabled community out if I can. So yeah, the media career is the big aspiration, I guess.
I mean, from what I know about it, which is more than zero, but not tons, you are absolutely doing the right thing and going in the right direction. And I suspect you already know most of the kind of disabled people that are influential in the media and in that kind of field. But if I notice any opportunities or anything in that area that I think you might be interested in, I would I'd love to send them in your direction because I think you'd be great.
Oh, thank you. That's really kind of you, and I'm a bit I'm a bit lost for words there, but thank you so much. I really appreciate that you want to help out with that. That's incredibly kind of you. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, and thank you to my audience for listening, and I will see you all next time.